Hey folks, this is Riker, and Diablo 4 Vessel of Hatred is a complete disaster. Or at least that's what some people want you to believe. We can run some math to guesstimate just how many people are actually playing the game right now. And the answer may surprise you. Now, sure, things are broken. No one can contest that. Some builds are reaching damage numbers you'll never believe. But some things aren't broken, despite rumors insisting that they are. We're going to debunk those. And Blizzard nerfed everyone's favorite build on Thursday, but is it really dead? We'll explore all these topics and more as we dive into this video. But before we move on, a word from this video's sponsor, which brings us something new from a familiar franchise. Age of Empires Mobile. I grew up in the old RTS days. Age of Empires 2 was one of my favorites. And if, like me, you've appreciated the strategy and depth that Age of Empires has offered on PC over the decades, you'll find that this official mobile release carries that same spirit while adapting seamlessly to mobile gameplay. Age of Empires Mobile is co-developed by Microsoft's World's Edge. They're the guys who did the Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition on PC, as well as Teeny Studios Group, who bring their mobile expertise. It builds on what made the series iconic: deep strategy, large-scale battles, and historical settings, but it optimizes these elements for mobile, making it accessible wherever you are. The game just launched on October 17th and is available for free on both the Apple Store and Google Play. And I love how they brought historical commanders like Caesar and Constantine into the gameplay. I've always been a geek for military antiquity, and there's over 100 famous historical heroes in this game. You recruit them, you pick their skills, you arrange your troop types, you lay siege to cities, and you work with allied players to build an empire. And it's all rendered with that Age of Empires charm, the authenticity and reproducing the architecture and the troops, just making it feel like a real historical campaign. Age of Empires Mobile had over 3 million players pre-registered before launch, which really speaks to the legacy of the franchise. If you want to give it a try, click the link in the description and use code AOEMGL. Early adopters can take advantage of some launch rewards and in-game item packs, but those offers are limited, so gotta download fast. Alright, so overall sentiment on Diablo 4's expansion has remained very positive among the active player base. We're now, 11 days post-launch, we're coming into our second weekend, and I know last week's video I was talking about how the expansion was received positively, and a lot of comments, a lot of you folks were saying, Riker, what are you talking about? Everyone is hating on Vessel of Hatred. Hating, yeah, no pun intended, but I think it's really just a matter of a hater's gonna hate. You know, some people basically just came back to Diablo 4 from last year just so they can come hate on D4 some more. I know some of you were pointing to like YouTubers and streamers, you know, making D4 bad videos again, or, you know, the Steam reviews, Metacritic ratings being low. I mean, anything Blizzard puts out at this point gets tons of hate. Tons of hate reviews, whether you want to call them review bombs or not, right? People hate Blizzard, people hate what they make, they're going to be extra aggro and aggressive. Even WoW's latest expansions, The War Within and Dragonflight, have pretty bad Metacritic user scores, despite being well-received expansions by WoW players. As for YouTube, hating on things generates clicks. The reality is, if you look at people who are part of the Diablo 4 community, people who don't hate Diablo 3, we're all having a blast with Vessel of Hatred. I've been streaming basically non-stop since launch. I have tons of people come by my chat. There's no big inundation of D4 bad comments. Believe me, I was there for the launch of D4. I've been with D4 since launch. I remember all the hate D4 was getting, and we're getting none of that now. Everyone playing is having a blast. I'm in the Diablo subreddits, the Diablo communities on Reddit, and everyone's having a blast. I polled my community on YouTube. 20,000 votes and only 5% are negative on the expansion. So this really is some vocal minority putting forth some idea that everyone hates the expansion. The rest of us are just too busy having fun. If you've been following the direction that the game has been taking over the past 5 seasons, and you've been enjoying those changes, then this really is the ultimate realization of the shift in that direction. Anyone who enjoyed Season 2, for instance, which most people agree is the best season, is probably going to love the game today. But for people who just fundamentally dislike what Diablo 4 was, Vessel of Hatred isn't going to change your mind. If you just hate Diablo 4, you're still going to hate Diablo 4. But the claim that Vessel of Hatred is terrible and everyone is hating on it, that's really just perception bias from some loud YouTubers getting hate clicks. And the vocal minority who just like to crap on everything that Blizzard does and refuse to give them a win when a win is deserved. And Vessel of Hatred is a win. Is it perfect? Oh, hell no. I've talked about some problems last week. We'll talk about some more problems this week. But everyone who's been actively playing pretty much universally agrees that this is the best the game has ever been. The Spiritborn, universally positively received. There's a couple outliers of people that aren't crazy about it, but... and sure, it's overpowered, yes. But that's a separate issue, which we'll talk about. But people just love the class design and how it plays. The mechanics of it. Not everyone loves the flavor, but just the way you can craft builds with it. It's so well done that people are hoping to see redesigns of the old classes to bring them in line with the Spiritborn, not just from a power perspective, but just from a fun perspective. And it actually makes you think, since we're pretty much guaranteed the Paladin-like class in the next expansion, it's maybe actually better that we didn't get the Paladin at launch, because now it's going to be the best design class yet. All that extra time taken to develop the Spiritborn, like another year of development, and that development being informed by the design process of making the other classes and seeing the community's feedback to the other classes, this has clearly resulted in the Spiritborn being so well designed. So I can't wait to see how the next class is going to feel. And by the way, well designed and well balanced are two separate things. For those who don't know, the Spiritborn was overpowered right out the gate. Kind of expected that, you know, Blizzard's going to release a new class, they're not going to make it underpowered, and everyone hates it and feels ripped off for their money. So it's kind of expected that it would be a little bit OP, or at least the strongest class. But there's a little bit OP, and then there is, So yeah, game releases, Spiritborn is OP. But over the past week and a half, more and more discoveries were made on how to mix and match different mechanics within the class to create absolutely disgustingly absurd amounts of damage. We're talking, no joke, quadrillions of damage. The Spiritborn is not just overpowered, it is eclipsing every other class by several orders of magnitude. For other classes, hitting for 1 billion, that's considered pretty damn good. Spiritborn are hitting not 10 times harder, not 100 times harder, not 1,000 times harder, not 10,000 times harder, not even 100,000 times harder. They are hitting 1 million times harder than any other class. Now the good news is that the vast majority of the content in the game does not require quadrillions of damage. Most other classes can handle Torment 4 well enough to feel second class to the Spiritborn, but at least not feel like an ant before the god being that is a Spiritborn, which is how you feel when you're pushing pits. That's the one place where you feel the gulf in an absolutely extreme way. In pits, Spiritborn have crushed the highest level pit, 150. And now it's just a race of beating each other's time. I think the record is under 4 minutes now, doing a pit 150. Meanwhile, the other classes, they're struggling to get to pit tier 115. It's an absolutely monstrous difference in balance. I mean, Spiritborn are so crazy overpowered compared to the other classes that some people are reporting getting kicked from group finder groups when they enter the party with, say, a barbarian. Or, they're otherwise being told, hey, swap to a Spiritborn. Do you have a Spiritborn character? Now, these broken Spiritborn builds emerged from combinations that are clearly unintended. They require hyper-specific setups with high-level gear and very specific combinations of affixes. You gotta reach certain breakpoints. It's all about finding where the math lines up just right to deliver bonkers hits. All this while benefiting from bugs like damage bonus double dips or incorrect tooltip info that players are able to figure out through rigorous testing. This is what I don't like about theory crafting in D4. I really like making my Hammerden build because It was just looking at the skills, looking at the items, finding combinations of things that make sense together, that synergize well. That's fun. But when designing a build is about, okay, well, which thing is busted and not doing what it's supposed to do, and oh, this is doing multiplicative damage even though the tooltip says additive damage, and it's somehow triggering twice when you crit, and this and that, and I doubt any of these things are going to survive Season 7. And we're going to go back to the powerful builds that we saw at Season start, which were still S-tier builds and probably the best builds in the game. But for now, those crazy broken builds, enjoy them. They're likely not going anywhere at least until mid-season, probably until Season 7. The team clarified that the only times they make balance changes are typically around mid-season or the start of a new season, with occasional exceptions if something is ruining the experience for others. So let's talk about the infamous Evade build. As soon as this build emerged early on into Vessel of Hatred, right away I knew it was going to be nerfed. Super fun build, but it relied on animation canceling out of your evade to spam evade much faster than intended. With that build, all your damage is coming from the feathers that spam out of you when you evade, so the infinite evade constant spam would be dealing blitzing damage. It was a very strong build, stronger than any other class, but it certainly was a far cry from the most powerful Spiritborn build. A patch on Thursday nerfed that build. And specifically, the list of reasoning was because the evade spam was worsening the experience for others. The implication is that it was causing server issues, lag for people in public areas. So now, with the patch, they made it so that you can no longer animation cancel your evade, which, to a first approximation, cuts the build's power in half. However, even at half strength, the build is still really strong. It's viable, you can run it, it's still probably going to outshine a lot of other classes in a lot of situations. It's not doing quadrillions of damage, never did. And as long as those crazy quadrillion damage builds are not causing server problems, then you can expect them to last again at least until mid-season. Honestly, probably longer if they want to keep sales up for the Spiritborn. The patch also brought with it a bunch of bug fixes, plus buffs to the Undercity rewards, nerfs to its difficulty. We got more iron and leather from salvaging to help with the material bottlenecks that people have been complaining about. We are getting adjustments, or we got adjustments to the Realm Walker event to make him walk faster and spawn more enemies, and sometimes a treasure goblin. I'm not sure that enough is done there to get Realm Walkers feeling really good, but hey, at least it's an improvement. Overall, the season theme is not going to be remembered as one of the better ones. The roar track is pretty unimpressive relative to Season 5, with slower progression as well. And the state of the game is now buggier and less stable than ever. Never have I had so many freezes, crashes, slowdowns. For people running NVIDIA drivers, I've heard people say that rolling back your drivers helps. However, despite all of the problems, people are still having more fun than ever. People are still logging in and playing a ton. There's also in-game bugs like Varshan's shields don't seem to be working properly. By the way, if you can't break Varshan's shield, as a workaround, try having everyone in your party move to the corner of the map. That should get him to drop his shield. But then something that was widely reported as a bug, but currently has no evidence to support that this is an actual bug that exists, and in fact we have seen footage now that proves it does not exist, the codex aspect bug. If after hearing this spiel I'm about to give, you still believe that this is a bug, record some footage of it, clearly show this happening, because right now we have no evidence of it other than anecdotes, and we have clear video evidence of it not being a bug, of it working as intended. So, what's the story? What's been going on with the codex bug? Many people have noticed that even after no-lifing the game for a week, most of us are stuck, apparently stuck, with our codex aspects at about 16 out of 21. A rumor started that if you extracted an aspect from an ancestral item, and that updated your codex, that your codex would then get stuck, and you could not upgrade your codex any further. Again, now we have video evidence proving this is not the case. We see a footage of someone extracting an ancestral, and then extracting a higher rank, and it working fine. So why do people think this is a bug? Why do people think this exists? Well, I think it's because of a number of things. First off is aspects on ancestral items roll with a higher max range. So An aspect on a non-ancestral may have a range of 1 to 4, but on an ancestral, it'll be 1 to 5. So you may get what appears to be a maxed out aspect, a 4 out of 4, but that's on a non-ancestral. You extract that into your codex and you're going to get 16 out of 21, not 21 out of 21. Only ancestral items can upgrade your codex beyond 16 out of 21. And even then, it's not a guarantee. The ancestral minimum roll is the same, so you get an ancestral item, it can still roll with it can have a roll lower than a non-ancestral, but it could go higher than a non-ancestral. And with ancestrals being so much more rare this season, people just aren't getting enough ancestral aspects to finish upgrading their codex. This is a big contrast to how things worked in the past and is leading, in my opinion, to a lot of confusion and belief that there is a bug when in fact there is none. Then mix in the fact that two-handed weapons roll with aspects that are twice as high as normal, but when extracted into the codex, they get cut in half, which can cause more confusion. And then similarly, amulets roll 50% higher, and the average player can't do the mental math on that. So you can't even tell if extracting that amulet is going to be an upgrade for your codex or not. All of these things combined, it's really understandable that people are confused. And beyond the confusion, some people are unhappy and they're like, hey, this is ridiculous. Why does it take so long to upgrade the codex now? And something I should mention, I like the idea of having a super long tail chase for the maxed out aspects, especially given that your codex aspect is something that once you get that, you have that forever, right? If we think about how we used to play the game in the past, we had to extract an aspect, and it was a physical object that we stored in our inventory and could then imprint. And we could only imprint it one time, and then we'd have to find the aspect again. So getting a maxed out codex aspect, being able to now forever imprint at max value, that's very strong. And so I like the idea of a long tail to fully max out everything in your codex. In fact, I'm pretty sure that I put forth this idea to the devs. So if you don't like this idea, if you don't like that it's hard to max out your aspects, you can fully blame me. However, when I put forth this idea, we played the game differently. We actually looked at every piece of gear because we were looking for aspects to extract and hold on to so that we can then imprint them onto items. So if you found a 4 out of 4 umbral roll, that got you excited. You would extract that and you would hold on to that and you would wait to use it on your best item. It was a great feeling to get that 4 out of 4 umbral. Now, needing to only ever find one 4 out of 4 umbral and then never needing to care about umbral rolls again, it felt like part of that item chase was going away that would keep me going in the past. So I did like the idea that, okay, ancestrals can roll even higher than regular items, and it would take you a really long time to find the perfect ancestral roll that goes, again, beyond the regular 4 roll. And you can get, now I can find a super rare 5 umbral. That's really cool, right? But here's the problem that I hadn't thought of back then. Under the new paradigm of not needing to hold on to aspects anymore, in practice, we just don't look at aspects at all anymore. We collect an inventory full of junk and we just salvage it because we know there's no harm to ignoring everything. Everything's going to get yeeted into the codex. So that's all you do. You just farm gear, ignore it, salvage it all, and occasionally your codex gets upgraded. You kind of ignore the little pop-ups on the left-hand screen. You're like, oh, yeah, guess I got an upgrade somewhere. Probably not for something I'm using. And you periodically will look into your codex and see, okay, did I get an upgrade from my main aspect yet? And you don't have those moments of, oh, look, I found my 4 out of 4 or my 5 out of 5 umbral now. So instead of hunting for rare, high-rolled aspects that we can get excited about, the codex now just kind of serves as this passive aspect level-up system that's just sort of there and doing its thing in the background, and you kind of, in your head, have the idea that it's upgrading. Every now and then, you go check it out, and now, people are furrowing their brows and being like, damn, I've been farming for a week. I'm still stuck on 16 out of 21. What gives? I haven't found a 17 out of 21 aspect yet? That can't be right. And I think altogether, the situation can be improved with clearer messaging. I think players need to somehow see that 16 is the max rank you can get on a non-ancestral, and feel that those last ranks are bonuses. They're extra chase ranks and not like, oh, I'm not done until I get my 21. Because right now, it's basically impossible to max out your codex, which I think is fine, but a lot of people are not going to think it's fine because when you give them something that cannot be completed and it feels like something that is framed in a way that it's telling you to complete it, they're going to be unhappy. So again, if it was, you know, you're 16 out of 16, cool, I'm done, and then somehow it's framed as bonus ranks, I think people will be more accepting as opposed to keeping it and seeing that 16 out of 21 and that feeling of incompleteness. Also, it might be nice that if we get an item that has a codex update for us, it's maybe going to be flagged with a little icon so that we can take the moment to actually look. Hey, oh, apparently this item's an upgrade for me. Let me look at what aspect is it upgrading. And then we can see, hey, 5 out of 5 Umbral, sick. This would be especially useful once we're at the phase of being at 16 out of 21 on most things, right? When we're farming the end game, we're being fast, efficient, we're not looking at things, we're salvaging en masse. Maybe that'll give us pause for a moment to look at the item. Another way to help with messaging is whenever hovering over an aspect, maybe, it can show us what the corresponding codex level is, like 4 out of 21. Oh, by the way, folks, if you're struggling to find Ancestrals, gamble Obols. Max out your Season Blessing, the Smoldering Ashes, to give you a second gamble item. You can get a lot of Ancestrals just from gambling, lots of uniques as well, chance of mythics too. Now, so while that was not a bug, something that was a bug, opals. Opals were working correctly. They weren't understood. They were working correctly, but there also was a bug that was making the opal bonus fall off sooner than intended in certain circumstances. So that, you know, people will be running an opal. It's like, okay, it's going to last for X amount of time, and then something happens and it falls off and you don't notice because you're not looking constantly at your buff bar because there's a million icons there anyway. So you don't notice that the elixir or whatever, the opal bonus fell off. You figure you time your elixir and your opal at the same time. They should both drop off at the same time, but no, it fell off sooner. You didn't notice. Now you're not getting any bonuses. You're wondering why. You think it's bugged. Well, that ought to have been fixed now. But something that made people feel like it wasn't working is how it actually works. Instead of getting Zaeith reputation on every monster kill, it's that when you kill a monster, there's a random chance that you gain reputation for that kill. So the Smoldering Ashes bonus gives you a better chance at getting that reputation on kill. But I think the system is just confusing. You should just give us lower amounts of reputation per kill and let the ashes buff the amount that we get. I don't know why they elected to make it a random chance to get reputation. Like, imagine if you killed a monster, you'd have a chance at getting XP. It doesn't make sense, right? At the very least, it's not intuitive and ought to have been communicated better. Now, that said, despite the bugs and the hoax bugs and the overpowered Spiritborn and everything, the game has been absolutely kicking. The release of Vessel of Hatred made Diablo 4 the most played game on Steam Deck. I'm sure it helps that the game is verified on Steam Deck, meaning it runs smooth out of the box. I've seen a lot of players report in on how great the game runs and feels on Steam Deck, playing it on the go. And if you look at the Steam numbers, we see that peak concurrent players reached 55,000 towards the launch of the game. That is, towards the launch of the expansion, rather. The previous all-time high on Steam was 40,000 players back in June, and just prior to the expansion's release, we were getting about an average of 10,000 players a day during the dead period of the season. Now, by yesterday, the daily peak concurrence had dropped to about 40,000, that same number, so retention isn't too bad 10 days post-launch. But these numbers seem pretty small and pathetic, right? 40,000 concurrents for a big AAA title by Blizzard, that's nothing, right? Well, factor in that this is on Steam alone. Diablo 4 is also on PC Battle.net, it's on Xbox, it's on PlayStation, and the population on Steam must represent the absolute smallest of those groups. D4 released on Battle.net, with no indication that it would ever come to Steam. It released on Steam months after launch on Battle.net. Out of nowhere, no fanfare, no warnings. And by that point, most PC gamers who wanted the game had already gotten it on Battle.net. Now, just how many people bought Diablo 4 on Steam? Well, we don't know, but we can guesstimate. We see that there were 26,000 user reviews for D4 on Steam. Now, industry estimates say that between 1 to 5% of users leave Steam reviews. And this is a Blizzard game, so people really like to hate on Blizzard. So let's go with the upper estimate there of 5%. So if 26,000 reviews represents 5% of the people who bought the game on Steam, that means that 520,000 people bought Diablo 4 on Steam. Now, Blizzard said that within 2 months of launch, they had sold 12 million copies of the game. This is before the Steam release. So, slap on an extra 520,000 players that bought the game from Steam after those 12 million. The 12 million is across PC and console. We're up to now 12.52 million. So, Steam's 520,000 represents roughly 4% of the player base. First approximation here. So, if we have 40,000 peak concurrents on Steam 10 days after the expansion launch, and we assume that player behavior across all platforms is the same, which is an assumption of its own, but again, first approximation here, then we can extrapolate that out to a minimum of 1 million peak concurrent players across all platforms. 40,000 represents 4% of 1 million. Now, again, that's assuming no one has bought Diablo 4 on Battle.net, Xbox, or PlayStation since August 2023, which is unrealistic. We need to project forward how many more copies of Diablo 4 have sold since the 12 million from over a year ago. Now, Diablo 3 sold 10 million copies within its first year, and by year 3 post-launch, with the release of its first expansion, it had reached 30 million copies sold. Though, of course, that figure of 30 million includes people who, they're basically buying the game twice, right? You bought the core game, you bought the expansion, that counts as 2 sales. So they don't count as 2 separate players. But in general, big AAA titles, they have their sales front-loaded from all the hype, after which sales slow down tremendously. So going by past trends in the industry, you can say that Diablo 4 has picked up maybe another 50% of its initial sales over the course of the last year. So 12 million, let's say it picked up another 6 million, bringing the total of players now to 18 million. So 520,000 of those 18 million, because the Steam sales would be counted in that, that represents now less than 3% of the population. So less than 3% of the 18 million are Steam players. So 40,000 concurrents on Steam, that's 3% of the population. That now extrapolates out to 1.4 million concurrent players across all platforms. And that's not even taken into account the Vessel of Hatred bump, which I don't even know how to estimate that, but you get the idea. 1.4 million concurrent players is a conservative. So to all the doomsayers saying D4 dead, despite all the hate, D4 is doing just fine. And speaking of hate, now more than ever, that more and more people have completed the story after the first weekend. We're seeing more and more unhappiness with the story, continued general hatred towards Narelle as a character. There's other little niggling complaints as well, like it's a little odd that we didn't get a new world boss with the expansion. I think a lot of people expected that. I expected that, kind of realized, hey, yeah, it's true, we didn't get a new world boss. But in fairness, world bosses aren't exactly a fan-favorite activity, so I'm kind of glad they put their efforts elsewhere. For instance, the Dark Citadel. I can't get over how much I love running the Dark Citadel. I have run it so many times now. And it seems people either love or hate the Dark Citadel. I've definitely seen people that don't like it. I don't know why I love it. It's my favorite thing to do, even though it's the same thing over and over again. There's just so many different mechanics. There's so much tension in ensuring that, okay, we're going to make this run. Sometimes we fail, we try again. I'm trying to beat our time and get more efficient, and I'm doing it to farm cosmetics while we're also helping carry people through. I have yet to get bored running this over and over versus spamming a tormented boss 20 times in a row is dreadfully boring to me. I think it'll be really awesome if we can get more raids like this in the future. And also, why they didn't add a new world boss, we did get new Legion events that are totally different from the existing Legion events. These are the best Legion events in the game. I know most of us ignore Legion events now, but at least try the Nahantu ones. They're really cool, especially the one in Vijun. But then back to a complaint. A lot of people seem to notice that we're getting knocked off our horses much more easily than in the past. Probably something weird is happening with the scaling into the new Torment difficulties that's making this happen. It would probably be nice if we can get horses back to where they were dismount-wise in World Tier 4 last season. Then rune crafting, kind of annoying. Our rune tab is not big enough to hold every rune. So it's like, okay, I'm filling up my rune tab, and then I still have to put some overflow runes into my stash, but I can't craft runes. If they're in my stash, I have to bring them back into my inventory. You know, small thing, but definitely some quality of life can be brought into rune crafting, just the entire process. Like, when you craft rune, it's not even clear what the outcome is. If you're not paying close attention to, oh, which rune in inventory, you got a little highlight on it for a half a second. I didn't expect to be finding myself missing the Horadric Cube. Just clear input and output, right? You put in your 3 runes, you hit a button, boom, you get a thing, and you see what it is. You don't have to sift through all the clutter of recipes, where you have to see, okay, which is the rune that I have? Okay, no, I want to save that rune. And hey, while we're on the topic of quality of life, wouldn't it be nice to be able to pre-program in our Paragon points? And then so, like, whenever you level up, it just auto-fills what you pre-established as a path? Maybe you can even export your Paragon board setup, share it with other people, right? A little, like, text string that you can import. For build guides, for instance, this would be especially important. I know everyone just loves staring at someone else's Paragon board setup and trying to find, okay, that little node there, okay, oh, all right, that node there, okay, eye exam time. Also, why do we have normal dungeons in Torment difficulty? Shouldn't all dungeons just be Nightmare dungeons at that point? Are people really running normal dungeons in Torment for any reason, apart from, like, maybe it rolled as a Whisper and then you're just kind of pissed that it didn't roll as a Nightmare dungeon? In fact, are we just past the point of needing a distinction between dungeon and Nightmare dungeon at all anymore? On that topic, though, the Whisper loop is pretty great now. There's a lot of endgame content to interact with in D4 at this stage, and Whispers can loop you through all these different activities. Undercity, dungeons, tormented bosses was a great addition. Helltide. The Whisper cash rewards are good. You don't feel like you're wasting your time chasing after Whispers. You often get value out of the activity the Whisper is making you do as well. I remember when Whispers felt like crap. They're just terrible. This is a really good state. Maybe we can even get updates to Legion events now, a revamp there, make them more useful and fun. You know, put them on par with the new Legion events and somehow bring them in as part of the Whisper loop. Oh, one feature that I don't see talked about enough. We have cursed shrines in Diablo 4. No, not the ones where you click on them and it spawns waves of monsters. Those are really nice. No, I mean like the old school curse effects. Like you click on a shrine, you're cursed for a certain amount of time, you have this debuff. Yeah, it's like called a conduit shrine. And when you click it, it turns you into this harmless ball of static electricity that slowly floats around, tickling enemies. We're tricked into clicking it because we're programmed to think that shrines are good, since all the other shrines are, like, at worst, neutral effects, and generally pretty positive effects. But man, does that curse shrine get me every time. Oh man, those devious devs. No way to cancel out of the curse or stop it other than just waiting it out. It's a nice little homage to the 90s era Diablos, right? You don't see stuff like that in games today anymore. Nah, but seriously folks, conduit shrines are probably a nice buff to people who aren't running any kind of build whatsoever and randomly assign their skills, but for anyone on any kind of build, it's generally a nerf to your output. Diablo 3 conduit shrines felt so good. You kept your build and just lightning shot out of you at all nearby enemies. Can we just turn this into the D3 conduit? It's so much more fun. But as we wrap up here, I just want to end by reaffirming that despite the complaints, a lot of these are very minor things, and it's just about, hey, everything is so great, so let's try to improve all the little things to make things perfect. Let's strive for perfection. All of this is coming off the back of me having spent about 100 hours playing this game since it launched. Clearly, I'm enjoying myself more than I ever have in Diablo 4. This is the most I've ever played, possibly any game ever in such a short amount of time. The game is not perfect, but damn is it fun. The extra Paragon levels, right? They prolong the chase. That was a big problem for me. I would get bored. I'd lose motivation to keep playing after I reach level 100. I'd just make an alt. Now I've been sticking with the same character. I have that extra incentive of the chase towards Paragon 300. Now I have rare cosmetics to hunt after in the Dark Citadel. Sometimes I'm chasing after rare runes so that I can build my mythics. Sometimes I'm chasing after ancestral upgrades. It just always feels like there's something more I can be chasing after, or multiple something mores. And it's great. Oh, before we end, the Diablo team also released this adorable, I guess, retro 90s era parody commercial about sleigh pals, toy versions of our mercenaries. It's pretty fun, you should check it out. Their little commercial jingle is a real earworm. It's dark humor, I enjoyed it. Now, apart from all this, I also wanted to talk about the updates on the cow level, but this video is already immensely long. I'll have a separate video just talking about the cow level updates. In short, though, we don't have access to the cow level yet, but progress has been made. We have acquired the Rusted Bardiche, which seems like what we need to move on to the next step. Also, folks, if you want some free cosmetics in Diablo 4, from October 8th to November 5th, you can get cosmetics just by watching Twitch streams. There'll be new cosmetics to farm up every week. You gotta watch at least 3 hours a week to earn the cosmetics of the week. You can watch me at twitch.tv/Riker. Also during this time period, if you buy or gift 2 subs, you get this horse, and 4 subs will get you the horse armor as well. Also, folks, we're doing the Patreon banner this year. Anyone who is a Patreon supporter by October 31st at patreon.com/Riker, even at the $1 pledge, will get your name on the shirt. And that's gonna wrap up this week's video. But do be sure to have checked out last week's video in which we discussed our week 1 impressions of Vessel of Hatred. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters for making these videos possible. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to join Riker's Raiders for more gaming content.